Welcome to the Pull the Shoot podcast with Jeff and Jana. This is our weekly venture into the world of small to medium-sized businesses and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives success.
So our goal here is to help you grow and to be the best you can be, both in business and personally. To do that, we identify and we discuss topics that will hopefully help you as you work to build a successful business.
We also interview business owners and executives. It's our hope that you may be able to gain insight on ways to help you be a better leader and provide a better culture for your people.
Our mission here is to help you pull the chute once a week to work on your business instead of always working in your business.
So we hope you find these discussions insightful, helpful, and useful.
And thanks for your support. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Well, welcome everyone to the Pull the Shoot podcast with Jeff and Jana. We are so excited that you are here. If you missed it, we just celebrated our 100th episode, so we're so excited about that. It really says a lot about this, Jana. So we really got some things going here.
Yep, it's fun. We had a good time. We actually did our 100th just with Jeff and I asking each other questions. It was really fun.
It was.
Anyway, so yeah, that'll be up soon.
So today, Jana, we have a special guest. Jim Bishop is here. He's actually in the Indianapolis area. We're excited for Jim to be here. He has an amazing company that he started called Conjunction. And I just blew that. I apologize. I'll edit that.
Conjunction Leadership.
Yeah, sorry about that, Jim. He has a great company that he founded called Conjunction Leadership. And we're going to learn a little bit about that today because I'm excited about one of the things that he talks about. And he talks about disrupt. And I'm really interested to learn a little more about that. So, Jim, welcome to the show.
Who doesn't love a good disruption? You know what I mean?
Well, actually, there's a lot of people who don't like change, Jana. So,
I bet. I can only imagine.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff and Jana. I appreciate it.
No problem, Jim. So before we get started and kind of jump in, Jim, we always like to have our guests tell us a little bit about themselves. So if you wouldn't mind, kind of tell us how you got to this place today, but give us a little bit of history for you.
Sure. So I'm classically trained as a scientist who figured out early in my scientific career that science was the solvable problem. The unsolvable problem was working with flawed and broken humans. And so while I was working in science, most of my clients were asking me questions about how do I hire or retain or train these people that were coming on board. And they really realized at that point, that School of Science didn't teach you much about emotional and social skills. And so I figured out pretty quickly that I had an aptitude for it. And I also had a natural curiosity. And I just kept diving in and saying, well, what about this? And how do we figure that out? And who can we bring to the party that will help us solve this problem? And pretty soon what happened was we earned more time with our clients and we figured out some of their more challenging problems. And through that, then I started pivoting my career to focus more on the human element. So I worked in leadership development and training and organizational development. I worked a little bit in career pathing, talent management, succession management, and then on into executive development and ultimately executive coaching. So a 25-year career in corporate America kind of taught me and gave me witness to some of the best leaders and also some of the leaders that would burn out pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And then in 2020, COVID hit and the world became crazy and upside down. A lot of my internal clients were moving external and I just chose to follow them because I figured out my best gift was on the outside, actually, where they could trust me greater. So today I have the opportunity to work with executives all across the world. And we spend a lot of time in the one-on-one figuring out what they want and how do they go get it after leading in many years of their career. Sometimes it requires them to do some things differently or to disrupt what they currently already know so that they can get to where they want to be.
That's so interesting, Jim. So in corporate America, what was, which I understand quite well, as so does Jeff, what was so you're basically working with kind of middle age, people, what, 40s, 50s, would you say, that have been in a corporate structure and then either want to disrupt that and go out on their own or take leadership roles in that structure, but do it in a different way. What was the biggest challenge you found in that corporate structure with these people that are in, being in communication? I know that's like the Gen Xers and a little, maybe older millennials, but really it's that 40 to 50s, right? Is that mostly what you dealt with? And what was the biggest obstacle you found in that corporate structure?
Yeah, I tell people it's, my average client's between 37 and 55, somewhere in that space. I don't know. There's just a lot of natural disruption that already occurs in your life during that period of time. Kids get older, parents get older. your roles shift, you're looking at
Mhm.
more responsibility in your work. So all of those things that are happening and shifting in people's lives cause a deeper reflection. And I think it happened a little earlier than maybe it would have otherwise for some people because of COVID or because of
Yes.
the pandemic and the isolation factor that many people felt. But it's that kind of existential wrestling that goes on in your soul that says, I think there's supposed to be more than just what I've got. Right. And so what I find is one of the biggest challenges, and I experienced it as well, like the hustle and the grind for many years became normal, right? And learning how to play the corporate politics and learning how to work within the structures that are already existing. And you know very well about what you need to do to advance your career. So you can project forward and see what the future will look like if you continue to do what you're doing. But yet that existential wrestling is kind of inside of you that says, but I think there's supposed to be something about legacy and purpose in this as well.
Mhm.
And it's that tension that people feel between the hustle and the grind and the legacy and the purpose. And sometimes they've realized they've lived outside of their power, if you will, that they followed the path that other people wanted them to follow to get what they thought they wanted. And only to realize that maybe inside of them is something they want even more, but it's a path that's more unique to them rather than the path that many people in a corporate role might follow. So, my story was very similar, that if I continued to chase what my career would allow and to advance my salary or to advance my position, I was going to get further and further away from actually working with the people. I was going to run a business or organize a structure or work with the kind of the dynamics of the business, but not actually with the heartbeat of the business. And I knew at that point in the journey that if I continued to follow that path, I would actually lose a little bit of what was making me find joy.
Mhm.
And I had to wrestle with the fact, like, how do I advance my career, advance my salary, and do what I know only I can do best? And that meant for me finding a way to bring this gift outside of a corporate structure to the people who are still living in a corporate structure. Um, Today, I work with people who are in mega companies, 50,000 employees or more. And I also work with entrepreneurs and founders who have left a corporate structure and have tried to start their own business, but are also kind of stuck in that mentality of like, there's not a lot of support around here and there's not a lot of help around here. And the things that a corporate world did give them, they don't often have anymore. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. So let's speak a little bit about this disruption idea, Jim. That's interesting to us. Jeff and I were actually kind of commenting on it before you jumped on because we think that's a really interesting way to put it. So speak to that a little bit, especially with your people that have jumped or even that are in a corporate structure, but want to disrupt a little bit, maybe want to do things a little bit differently, So tell us
Correct.
a little bit about how you talk that off to your clients, the disruption aspect.
For sure. In my coaching journey with people, there's really the output of that is growth, and people want growth. It's naturally attractive for us to say we want to grow as human beings.
Sure.
In order to grow, though, most things need to be broken up or disrupted a little bit. A soil needs to be planted, the seed coat needs to break open, then the plant germinates. People don't naturally like the disruption phase, but for leaders, I follow the disrupt, bridge, and grow process pretty closely in that journey. That in order for them to get what they want, we first have to unlearn or disrupt some of the patterns that they're currently in. Especially once we've entered midlife, we probably have gained enough wisdom and experience to know that if I run this program, so to speak, this is the output the computer will generate.
Right.
And so people get trapped in a rut of running the same program over and over and over, hoping to get different results, but it doesn't happen. And so we go back into saying, where did this pattern come from? And has this served you well? And where is it not serving you well? Once we get to that point, we can disrupt the mindset that has enabled them to develop the behavior so that they can start taking on new behaviors and getting different results. But what I often find is for 25 years, I was in a training role almost, and I put people in classroom situations and tried to teach them new skills. And people would gain behavior modification, if you will, but they wouldn't have the disruption and the change of mindset that would enable it to stick and stay for long term. They would just be following another program without a different mind, and the program became useless or redundant eventually. So that disruption phase is candidly one of the hardest phases and the longest phases in our journey together for leaders to get comfortable with as they realize some of these pieces of me are so ingrained, I'm not even aware of them anymore. These are the reactivity patterns that I've learned, or the way that my nervous system has wired itself against what I perceive as the patterns of the world. And to get to that point requires them to really kind of step into that courageous space to go, okay, I am willing to give up a little bit of who I am to get to the person that I want to be.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Now, do you do that through exercises, through visualization, through probably a little of everything, right?
Yeah.
That as well as actual steps in change.
Yeah, we have there's a pretty, I don't want to say formulaic process. Every leader that comes to me, we organically build the relationship, and I have a whole host of tools and resources, but I use a lot of evaluations and a lot of 360s and a lot of behavioral pattern analysis. We look at those things. I have them kind of step back into their journey, even as early of memory as they can, to the point where they're kind of educational years and then their career years. And we bucket into those three areas and look at how they've reacted to the patterns of power in the world. You know, maybe that was power structures in your home, or power structures in your education, or power structures in the corporate world. And when they do that, they realize that sometimes that their reaction to that power hasn't always been helpful. It's got them where they wanted to be, but it hasn't enabled them to break free into kind of the self-authoring space where they're creating the future rather than reacting to it. So,
but
Yeah,
what you're really
yeah.
talking about when you were talking about this disruption piece is like helping them build muscle memory to react differently.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? If I can put it in other terms, right? Which I think is key, because that's one of the things that we struggle with. You know, we talk to some of our clients as well. We have a tendency to say to them, look, you know, you're reacting the way you've always reacted, and we need to build new muscle memory to react differently. And you're right, it is hard.
That's a great point, Jeff. And you know, in communication, I talk about this a lot. The beginning years, those formulaic years, I say 3 to 13, 14, those years are crucial in how you were raised, the values that were set up and taught to you, the freedom to express, the structure in the home or whatever it was, and even in school. It's interesting. It is absolutely programmed into us in those formulaic years. And so it is muscle memory. That's a big one, because I talk about that a lot in communication. It's the same thing.
Yeah. This is where my science background. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Jim. But we are. The three of us will agree. We kind of are creatures of habit. We are. I tell people this all the time, and they get all insulted. We're simple animals. You know, the human species is not that complex. You know, so it's kind of interesting how you do have to break down some of these old ways to teach them new ways, and then they have to practice those new ways to make them become muscle memory. That's great.
What were you going to say, Jim?
I find that this is where my science background, I get to go back in there all the time, and I'm fascinated. My master's is in physiology and behavior, so I love to learn about the brain. And once people learn that their brain is kind of a budgeting organ, right? It is the thing that budgets the energy for survival. So that reactivity pattern that we develop early in life, the way that we're programmed, if you will, has been the mental shortcuts that enable our body to survive with the least amount of energy output. And so that means if someone in my journey was more powerful or dominant and I became much more submissive or compliant, that was just the quickest way for me to regulate so that I didn't have to fight that tension all along. Or if I felt like I was too, if I needed to win all the arguments and I could win on intellect, my brain went into hyperdrive so that I could survive on intellect. And other people survive just on sheer will, being able to outwit and outplay and outpace everyone else, right? Those are really good, and they help us in a lot of ways because our brain is budgeting the energy for our survival, until what happens is our soul gets mixed in there, right? And our soul says, hey, I want something else. I don't get to speak because I'm being too compliant, or I don't have a lot of friends because I'm always trying to win the argument, or I'm just totally burnt out because I'm always trying to outwit and outplay everybody else, right? And when that tension between the brain and the soul comes into play, what we have to do is help the brain rebudget energy in a different way and think what survival actually is. It's not survival, it's thriving at this point. You need to not just play to react, you need to play to win, and the win according to your own definition. And when I can take people through this pathway and help them see their physiology as actually in control of some of their behavior, they realize, oh, then I'm not broken. I'm not messed up. I can relearn things, right? And it's
Yeah.
you could just see this tension drain away from them, like, "Ah, I can get better now."
So how
Wow.
much do you compare the emotional side of the brain, which I think you're talking about when you say the soul, with the logic side of the brain, right? Because to me,
Yes.
it's like those two, when you can bring those two together, the limbic part of the brain, right, which is all your emotions, which doesn't understand language at all, right? And then you bring the logic part of that stuff, really creates a powerful, reaction and allows people to really be good leaders. Is that something that you focus with them on when you do that?
Absolutely. Like emotional regulation, emotional intelligence in general is a huge component. I tend to work with a lot of men. And that's probably something that most of my clients, and I would say in general, most people with an X chromosome or Y chromosome didn't grow up learning. We learned how to down regulate some of those emotions, or we learned what emotions were acceptable and not, but we didn't put a name to it. And so if I felt shame, I might have gotten angry, right? And I let my anger show and I learned to down regulate my anger, but I never learned to admit that I felt shame as a result or in the first place. Or if I showed emotion out on the ball field, what happened was someone told me to rub it off, get away from it or rub dirt on it, because that would show vulnerability, right? If you cried in front of your team or whatever it was. And so most men never grew up with that. And I tell them emotions will make terrible servants, but they make terrible masters, but they make great servants. Because what can happen is if you don't understand them, they're always there controlling you. And if you bump into something that does cause you to feel shame, what's going to happen is you're going to step back over here to your anger bucket instead of saying, why am I feeling shame and what do I do about that?
Right.
Maybe I need to speak that into existence and master that so that it doesn't master me. And once I find, like, I put an emotion wheel in front of my clients and say, here, pick one. What are you feeling? The look that they give me to begin with is often like they have no idea. But eventually, once they start naming those emotions, they're realizing, like, I can be in control of these things, and they're starting to step through in more courage and more power and more victory. It's quite amazing.
That is awesome. So
Very interesting.
we're in this new, I call it the new leadership landscape, where people are wanting to feel more appreciated. They're wanting leaders to show them empathy. They want them to encourage them and give them a voice and all this stuff. How does your leadership coaching fit into all that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the greatest convictions that I had why it was time to leave corporate America in 2020, is because of all the social dynamics that were going on.
Sure.
And I saw so many leaders in their best intention to keep the business open and keep people employed. They were focusing on the mechanics of the business.
Yeah.
And they were, what do we need to do to get the supply chain working? What do we need to do to get the customers flowing? How do we get product here? And they were focusing on all of those things. And at the same time, they were missing the greatest moment that could possibly happen. People were reaching out to be seen. The physical distance that people had, the emotional insecurity they felt, not just because of the pandemic, but because of all the social unrest and the justice issues that were coming to light. Bringing the issue of diversity and inclusion into the conversation. When we weren't physically able to include people, we were only able to see their eyeballs and their shoulders, right? Those were the moments in time when there were so many leaders who could just take a moment to acknowledge the emotion that was being expressed. Would have made a huge difference. But instead, what they wanted to do was say, we have 30 minutes for this Zoom call and we got to figure out how we get product to customers. And they were missing the moment of connection.
Yes.
When I felt that was happening, I almost, and I think many people in this sense could see the world had just pivoted and it wasn't probably going to pivot back. And if leaders missed this moment in time, they were gonna damage their leadership reputation for a long term, because the generation that's coming behind totally expected it. And this was the moment in time when it was happening. And the generation that was in front often didn't even feel comfortable doing that. That wasn't something that was expressed to them or shown to them or modeled for them in their MBA programs.
Yes.
It was literally just around, how do we run a business? And this whole pro-social kind of connection that leaders needed to have. So I totally agree that this is the time when leaders have to adapt their leadership to the present time, because the employee value proposition has completely changed in what people expect from their work. Yes, I want paid. yes, I want to make sure it makes a difference. And I also want to know that I am being seen and valued as a human being, not just as a human doing in this workplace.
Right.
I think that's so true, especially this Gen Z. The Gen Zers won't put up with it. They want at least equal acknowledgement to talk and to express their ideas about their position and what they're doing within a corporate structure or a business structure. It's so interesting to me because when I do these seminars and things where there's all four generations in the room, these Gen Zers, they're not putting up with somebody telling them what to do. And this is the way it used to be. So this is the way we do it now. And Jeff and I have talked about that so many times that sometimes the new way is better. Sometimes a different way is better. Sometimes these younger generations have a better idea than the older generations do at supply chain or at the communication or at the sales process. So it is different. I definitely feel the pandemic started that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it just brought to light what was already bubbling, right? And I tell my clients, like they're frustrated when they start expressing frustration over generational differences. I'm like, do you have kids? Because if you have kids, you're the one that raised them, right? And that when you take them into their parent mind, it's not so foreign because we wanted our kids to have more opportunities than we did. So we put them in not just one dance program, we put them in tap, jazz, and ballet all together. And we didn't want them just to be one sport athlete. We put them in 3 sports and we took them to travel sports. And so they've never not had a coach beside them and never not been in a relationship where they're able to speak back and get to the next level faster. Mm-hmm. And then we put them in corporate America, and the leader, who was a latchkey kid, said, I had to raise myself. You better raise yourself. So go figure it out.
Yeah.
And the leader, when I take them into their parent mindset, they'll be like, oh my gosh, I did that. Right. And it's at that moment they can expect they can appreciate the difference. But in 10, what they're doing is just looking through their business hat and they're fighting the difference. So
yeah, it's crazy. There's a stat that I just saw like maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And it said that by 2025, 75% of the workforce is going to be millennials, but that 69% of those millennials feel unprepared to be in leadership roles.
Yeah.
Which is like a scary thought, right?
That is.
Yeah, it's a scary thought. I also wonder, like, there are a lot of things that millennials. We've created an environment where sometimes it feels unsafe to try, right? And we put our kids into situations where we know they can only succeed. And we as parents have kind of sometimes regulated their environment enough to give them the chances of success. So when we put them in a corporate structure or a work structure and they enter and they don't know what the future looks like, there is no defined pathway. No one is there helping coach them or make that environment feel a little safer. It's almost as if when you walk from a lighted room into a dark space and your eyes have to adjust, but you lock up. I see so many of the younger generation locking up when they come into the career world because they just don't know what the rules are. And they've never not known what the rules were.
Yeah.
Like that's, as a parent, that was what we did. We provided the rules. We provided the structure. We gave them the roadmap of success. If you do this, you'll get good grades. If you get good grades, you'll get into college. If you get into college, you'll get a good job. Yeah. And then what? And they're like, I don't know. I feel unprepared. Right. So I can appreciate what they're saying. I think what we really need to work on is not their preparation for leadership, but again, that mental wiring that develops resilience in the midst of trying. Mm-hmm. Like every experiment is just another way for them to learn what I know and what I don't know. Yeah. Not something that I'm going to fail at.
Well, I think it's interesting that the younger generations don't have as much value on college as they used to. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you, but I had to go to college. There wasn't really a choice. Whereas now the younger generation is like, I'm not going to college. I might go to a trade school. Or my son started in college and went into culinary school. Yeah. So now he's got a AA in culinary, and which is what he wants to do. It's so funny. He's like, I don't need a degree for what I want to do.
Yeah.
I know. I have a ton of friends whose kids feel that way.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I mean, I think there's a lot to be said when you feel like you have more options, right? And I don't think that there's any downside in that. I appreciate even more the employer movement of saying there are jobs in our company that no longer require you to have a degree. Like we can teach you what you need to know about computer programming, or we can teach you what you need to know about cybersecurity. Those are very valuable pieces of of information that people can have, and they'll develop a great career from it without having $40,000 a year in debt. I'm trying to figure out what college looks like for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Hey, Jim, thank you so much. We got to kind of wrap things up here, but thank you so much for being on. Really love the insight, integrated the way that you're doing things and just the way that you're thinking through things. Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate that. If people want to get a hold of you, Jim, how can they do that?
Yep. The fastest and the easiest way is just to follow along on LinkedIn. That's where I'm posting most of my content daily. I also have some downloadables on there and a quick way to schedule a call if you need to. Website is probably the most comprehensive. It has who we are, what we do, why we do it, and who we work with, all of that good information. So conjunctionleadership.com. I'm on a few of the other socials, Facebook, Instagram, those kind of things too, but those are more expository thoughts probably rather than some of my professional downloads for people. So
awesome. Well, again, appreciate you being on the show today so much. And we've talked about and just uncovered, I think there's a lot more to talk about here. And so we always like to reserve the right to bring you back as a guest in the future.
Yes.
Hopefully
absolutely
you'll come back and join us. That'd be great. Thanks so much. To our listeners out there, thank you as always for participating and for giving us feedback. We love that. We're excited that as we started the show, we said we celebrated our 100th episode. And just keep supporting us. We appreciate that so much. Until the next time, stay safe and be healthy.